Hello, welcome everybody. I'm Alan Levin, and this is one in a series of interviews I do with people who have crossed boundaries and are doing really good work in the world. And today you can find more interviews on the YouTube channel under my name and crossing. It's called Crossing the Boundary, and also the podcast series Crossing the Boundary. Today, I have the honor, and I'm really happy about talking with Chief Dwaine Perry. Dwaine Perry is the elected chief of the Ramapough Munsee Nation, which has about 3,500 members in New York and New Jersey. He's a Vietnam War veteran and also an environmental and human rights activist. After he returned from Vietnam, he enrolled at Rockland Community College, where he was instrumental in establishing the college's first student organization for people of color. He later earned a bachelor's degree from Pace University and then a master's in community economic development from Southern New Hampshire University. He worked with Conrad Lynn for a while. For those of you who don't know, Conrad Lynn was a famous African-American civil rights attorney, controversial in many ways, doing work for people who were on the very progressive end. He aided with him in establishing an indigenous rights group that was to become the precursor to the reformation of the Ramapough Munsee Nation's modern restructuring. Chief Perry continues to champion human rights today, focusing primarily on issues concerning the Ramapough Munsee Nation, decolonization, and the indigenous community at large. He has sat with elders and indigenous leaders in the Himalayas, the Andes, and throughout North America. His journey to Standing Rock resulted in the establishment of the Split Rock Sweetwater Prayer Camp in northern New Jersey, which we'll talk about a lot of this as we get into the interview and the conversation. He's also currently working to establish the first embassy of sovereign indigenous nations of the Western Hemisphere. He now lives at his childhood home in Hillburn, New York, has two daughters and a granddaughter. And unless anything new has happened, you still have one granddaughter, Chief, or is anybody?
Yep, I have one on the way, and
one on the way.
Actually, I have three daughters.
Okay.
Three daughters, but two granddaughters and one grandson.
Great.
Actually, two grandsons.
All right. Well, let's just start with your life at the beginning as a child. And can you talk a little bit about where's your family when you were growing up as a kid? Very involved with Native American, Indian activities or culture? Did you grow up with a strong Native American identity, or did that evolve and develop as you grew older? What was it like as a kid for you?
It was really kind of interesting because until we actually got to like Suffolk Junior High School, I had no idea that there was actually different kinds of people. Our community, up until recently, I've always read all these wonderful sort of communal caring things that Native Americans do in their community. Well, that was just a normal part of our village. I didn't look at it. It wasn't separate from, it wasn't something we did. It was just how we conducted ourselves. If somebody was in need, you reached out to them. You didn't go, oh, they don't have it. You sort of said, gee, I got a little extra. Particularly when I grew up, it was probably in the mid 50s. Everyone I knew had some kind of garden. And somebody always had access. They were always giving it to other people. There was never a concern. If somebody didn't have, we reached out to make sure they did have. And later on in life, I'm finding this is sort of the epitome of what Native American communities look like. And in terms of ceremony, the elders always did ceremony. Occasionally, we were privy to do it with them. A lot of them were done. Right now, there's any number of sacred stone features in the mountains surrounding Hillburn. and we purposely have not opened them to the public in most part, is because, as you well know, and next thing you know, they're destroyed. So up until now, we've not really felt free to express ourselves spiritually, although we've just had a wonderful thing going on. We are changing the direction of that.
Yeah.
But the question
But
was,
just staying with your childhood for a minute, though,
yeah, that's what I
so
was
you
going
lived
to.
in a community that was composed mostly of other Native Americans, and you felt like
Yeah.
you were
Well,
part
I
of
would
that?
say that the entire community, we were all Native Americans. We were Ramapoughs. That was the Sweetwater clan of the people of the mountain, the Munsees. And when you're talking people of the mountain, you're talking the Adirondacks, you're talking historically 40 or 50,000 people. We're basically um, at the end of what might look like quiet genocide now, but our childhood was very friendly. Every lady basically was your mother.
Hmm.
You know? Every man was someone to look up to. That actor was either called them an uncle or they were uncles. Like I said, until I was actually privy to going to Suffern Junior High School, I hadn't realized that most communities were not extremely tight knit. The only time I did see sort of we'd go into the forest and do ceremony, but I think it was in maybe the early '60s. I remember the women seemed to be going off quite a bit into the forest by themselves. And I remember asking what they were doing, and the answer was they were doing Indian stuff, and that was sort of code for mind your own business. And what I found out was they were actually going up to Split Rock, the Tahita Way, and up into the forest and praying and doing certain ceremonies. And then I think later on, it was around 64, 65, they started burning crosses up there. So that sort of brought that to a halt. And then later on, I guess up through the '70s, I call it beer bottle heaven. We went up there. Every time we go up there, was more and more and more and more beer bottles broke all over the place. And I know we're talking about childhood, but now, just in the last 3 years, we've been able to regain control over the site. And indeed, we're looking to make it a World Heritage Site. But growing up, I don't know. I would imagine, like any community, that's who you were. That's who everybody was.
Yeah.
Like I said, I do recall I think we had two little blonde girls in the school, and we had one family that was visibly black. We didn't know that. I didn't know that this kid was darker than everybody, or these little girls were lighter than everybody. They were just little human beings. And
That was until junior high.
yeah, that was
Why that
until
changed?
junior high. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And we got to junior high, and it changed everything dramatically. I mean,
Uh-huh.
initially, when we went to get off the bus, people called us a lot. And as kids, this is crazy, but as kids, we used to like to fight each other, not like fight and hold a grudge, like fight. And we like to throw rocks. We like to throw rocks and fight each other. So I know, maybe never thought about it. Maybe they didn't have money for toys, but we were having a ball with this. And we'd spend, after breakfast, we would leave in the morning and come back at dinner time. We would spend the entire day in the woods. It was just wonderful. And so when they called us names up at junior high school, our first thought was, wow, this is cool. You can fight you can fight and throw rocks at all these big kids. We're going to have a good time. We didn't know they were slandering us till like we got home. And of course, our parents explained that to us. That changed the whole dynamic. But I think up until then, we were just sort of a loving communal neighborhood.
You say you had any particular mentors or people that stand out as role models for you as you grew up?
Well,
Guided
absolutely.
you?
course, everyone knows Redbone, but I think maybe the most influential person was my grandmother, and mainly because she was really sort of a civil rights advocate.
Mm.
She was really involved. I know my aunt and them worked to start was it the Women's Garment Union or something?
Mhm.
So they were all very socially conscious. But I also know that my aunt, and she shared it in her 90s, that when she was going to school, she wanted to just use a typewriter, and they told her, "You people don't need to learn about no typewriters." And apparently, she heard that in high school, and she was in her 90s when she said that. She was still very much hurt that they simply denied her the use, thought she was not good enough to use a typewriter.
Yeah.
So I think for the most part, the community was fairly insular up until maybe, like I said, the 60s. And there was all the men.
What happened
We
then?
would go into the forest. The men, we would go and do ceremonies.
Yeah.
And that really meant be quiet and listen and learn.
Uh-huh.
Uh,
So you were
and in between
exposed
that, we just, yeah,
you were exposed
I'm
and
sorry.
participated in ceremonies when you were young, when you were a teenager.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That's what I'm saying. I didn't think it was anything different until we got out of the community. I just thought everybody did that.
Yeah.
And literally, if you can imagine today, we used to literally leave the house after breakfast and come back at dinner time and spend the entire day roaming the woods.
Uh-huh.
Imagine that now. They would think you were neglecting your child or something.
Right.
I
Right.
mean, and yeah, we'd see snakes and bears and chickens and, well, rather turkeys. And
Mm.
it was just a wonderful thing. And we learned to sort of creep around. It was beautiful.
Mm.
And
Were there any major turning points that you feel were big shifts in your consciousness in your life? Where things really
I
turned
think the
around, or
I think the first thing that sort of woke me up, we went to get our haircuts in Suffern, and there was 5 of us, and you might even know the McMillan family. Anyway, we went to get our haircuts. You'll love this. This is crazy. And the guy went into all of this stuff. We're not cutting his hair. We don't want that kind of talk. We're not going to cut it. And we're thinking, well, that's stupid. But then we remembered Dr. King said, if anybody ever does that, you should stand up. So we said, okay, so you'll love this, Alan. So there's 5 of us. We're outside. We're picketing. This is what we think we're doing. We're walking back and forth. There's 5 of us kids.
in front of a barbershop?
And this rabbi comes down the street, and he says, what are you kids doing? We said, well, we're protesting because he's not going to cut our friend's hair. He said, kids, you got to have signs or something. He gave us money for oak tag and magic markers to make. We'd still be walking.
Did he ever give that kid a haircut?
No, but I think they closed up a little while after that.
Uh-huh.
But I just think back, we didn't know. We thought, thank God the rabbi showed up. We'd been in trouble. So,
So that was your
so
first
that was sort of
protest. Your first
yeah,
protest.
that was our first protest,
Uh-huh.
and it just grew beyond that.
Were
But
the
that was the
60s
first sort of,
were
yeah,
the
I would say
60s
it
a big
was.
part of your life? The whole cultural revolution that was going on?
Yeah, well, I think, yeah, I think that's what you had, really. You had us sort of emerging. I would imagine a lot of children at that age are just emerging from your own community.
Yeah.
And we've always sort of lived a sense of communally. It wasn't like you or mine. If somebody didn't have, we didn't go, oh, poor Alan. We'd go, Alan needs a shirt. Somebody got an extra one. Make sure you had one. It was just more of caring for a person. It wasn't helping them. That he was reaching out and embracing them in a good way. But the 60s seemed to have embodied that. And that was sort of that whole hippie thing. And so it was just kind of normal, and it was great. And I think
Did it seem like
around
the population at outside of the Native community was kind of, for a moment at least, opening somewhat to the kind of way of life that you saw as your own people's way of life, that
Yeah, it was.
sort of
Yeah,
freedom
it's sort of.
sharing.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
yeah. I think that's a pretty good analogy. Yeah, we started to see as that's what all of us are doing, and of course, that's changed drastically. I think inside and out of the tribe in the last number of years.
Yeah.
Uh, but to me, it was just a wonderful. It was just wonderful. I hadn't been aware. Now this is a really great thing with the women in Hillburn. I know you're aware the Hillburn Elementary School was integrated 11 years before Brown versus Board of Education.
I just learned.
Okay, it was yeah, it was Thurgood Marshall at the time helped. He was considered a rebel rouser. The NAACP was going down out of business. They were just frowned upon, but they worked with the women. They got it done. And I think what's astonishing beyond the 11 years before that, beyond the fact that it was women that did it even back in the early 50s, it was Native American women that did it.
Hmm.
And they have to this day yet to be appreciated or acknowledged for that. That's astonishing. That is truly astonishing. It was basically the women of Brook Church in Hillburn, is still there, that really integrated the first school in the United States and set that whole standard with Thurgood Marshall and them. And my guess is, if Thurgood Marshall and those women weren't successful, you wouldn't have been hearing his name now, because he was frowned upon at the time. He was just a rebel rouser. But that
Your
was
grandmother was
also a
part of
great
that.
achievement.
Your grandmother
My
was part-
grandmother, but yeah.
Yeah.
We had two schools, Brook School, which was the colored school. And you were asking about the community early on when I was a kid. They put Route 17 through Hillburn to divide the community.
Hmm.
So one side of the community for many, many years was like the white side, and the other side was the colored people, you people. And it just started to ease up on integration as I was going into elementary school. But even I think up through high school, there was still sort of a demarcation line. And people think of the Deep South, but we're talking about New York here.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Let me ask you a few questions just about the tribe itself. Ramapough Lenape Munsee. Can you break that down a little bit? Like,
yeah, well, internally we are Munsees. We're Ramapoughs. Ramapough would be. Let me break it down here. Here's how it would look. Ramapoughs is a clan. It's the Sweetwater clan. Our clan, unlike everybody loves Indians, we were farmers. So anyway, we're the Sweetwater clan. The band, which is a larger unit, were Munsees. Munsees was called the Wolf Band, but it was also known as the Peoples of the Mountains. When I mean the mountains, I mean the Adirondacks, the foothills, all of that.
all of New
So the
York.
larger thing, yes, the larger part would have been, actually Munsee, it would have been Iroquois. But the reason they went with Munsee was a homogenous way to identify all the people that primarily had fled the area. And I'm not talking just right here, but also Jersey, down toward Jersey, Delaware. A lot of Munsees, went up to Canada. There's 5 or 6 other tribes in New Jersey that went out west. All of those people identified themselves as Lenape. And it's on our older flag, but we're looking today to turn more inward, and we're simply being the Ramapough Munsee. So Lenape is sort of an expansive night. The Lenape are the people that left for whatever reason.
I see.
And right now we're facing,
You don't use Lenape to describe yourself.
Right. In-house, we would be Munsees, but we're trying to, you know, trying to be social. But recently, we've come under tremendous racist attack from people in Oklahoma who are claiming to be from here. Uh, they got the money. When we first heard about them, the state had uncovered some remains up around Poughkeepsie. So they contacted them. They contacted the Stockbridge. They contacted us. And people might not know this, but we have the largest Muncie burial ground of antiquity right here in Morwell. Yeah. Could be, it's estimated, it's about 32 acres. There's a number of thousands of people in it from maybe as far back as 4,000 years.
Is that preserved and identified?
Well, we're working to preserve it. And like I was saying about just the other formations, it's a lift. I think the most important thing we can get is our allies, because these people, some of these people are still deeply rooted in themselves. Let's just leave it like that.
Mm. Okay.
I personally, we're facing, and we're really facing almost the end of survival, and the reason really is because we are on potentially some of the most valuable land in the country, which would make it in the world. And then how race plays in forever, there's been a great leverage of some of these towns around here can make Jim Crow blush. But I think the real reason in the last few years it's about money. If we can leverage race against you or any other comment, then that's what it is. This is metropolitan New York. Nobody cares about you being an Indian. They want your land. They want you off, and they've been fairly successful. I think, I don't know if you're aware of it, but historically, we've just started to have good relationships with Morwell. But up until recently, Morwell High School was encouraging our children to drop out at 7th or 8th grade. Now, think about this. Then the township gave them really good paying jobs working for the town, driving trucks and all of that. That's all good. But if you don't have any other option to make that kind of money except working for the town, in effect, you're an indentured servant. And that goes into manipulating zoning. At one point, most of the tribe had 3-4 acres. They said, well, you got to have 5 acres to build a house. So everybody thought they had some acreage. You give your child a place to build a house. Once everybody liquidated their excess acreage, they changed the zoning back to 1 acre per household. Now there's a land rush of McMansions, but nobody looks at that. I mean, to me, that's more than Jim Crow with a tuxedo on. And that's not yesterday. This is in New Jersey.
So currently,
and Harriet Tubman, currently.
And
Harriet Tubman, currently.
What I ask you is that
Sorry.
currently the 3,500, 4,000 members of the tribe live in their own places. Is that right? It's a sort of decentralized.
Primarily, yes. Yeah, primarily they're all nice little. Right. Well, they're most of them. There's some in Hillburn, Ringwood, and Morwell. But for the most part, everybody sort of lives in their sort of at one point middle class sort of nice little 2-3 bedroom home.
Yeah. And so you became the chief, and that's an elected position, as I understand it. So,
right.
Describe a little bit just what that means, that you're the chief. Is it a spiritual role? Is it a political role, an administrative role? And is there much more of a government? Is there a vice chief? I'm just sort of kidding, but or a legislative body of some kind?
Yeah. Well, to start with, the chief, people need to know chief is not a description of the person in charge. It's essentially, it's when people call you chief, the thought with that is that they're honoring your people. So by calling you chief, they're really saying we respect your people. Of course, in modern times, that gets twisted up a little bit with thoughts of authority. We do have a governing body. Usually, how it happens, we have a general council, a tribal council. It's made up of essentially about 10 people. 2 people and the representatives from each area. For instance, we do have people that live down this large Ramapough population in Staten Island. So it's made up of that. Then we also have, we're really fortunate, we have the women's circle, which is really made up, obviously, of women and elders. And then we have an elder circle. So if there's something of real importance happens, everybody dialogues that and gives their recommendation to the council, and then we sort of formalize it. And that's, so in a way, it's sort of a casual conversation. But when they, like I said, the elders will give a recommendation, the women's council will give a recommendation, and then the tribal council themselves will dialogue and formalize it and put it on paper and whatever it needs to be done. And there's sort of 2 entities in a way because of law. The tribal council is purely a political body. But we have 1 or 2 nonprofits. They are purely not connected to the tribal body because they have to be apolitical. So they serve the people with their own separate councils.
What
So
are some of the current issues that the tribe is facing? You touched on some of it already, I know, but can you talk a little bit more about what it is the tribe's doing, what kind of decisions you do make, and how you're dealing with some of the pushback I know that you got, at least earlier on. I participated with a lot of other people outside the tribe, from outside the tribe, at the prayer camp ceremonies and so forth. So
right.
Tell people about what that's all about, what's going on.
Well, when the ceremonies, like for instance, like we just did one here about a week ago. It was sort of a unifying of spirituality, and what that particular one was, it was more of a combination of all of the folks that came that we could share and say that everyone really has value, and that everyone is truly important to us going forward as human beings. And that's essentially the heart of most ceremonies. I mean, a lot of people know they call them sweat lodge and EP ceremonies. Depending on who's conducting those, they can be simply for prayer and cleansing. And believe it or not, some people actually are healed depending on the ceremony and depending on who conducts it. There are healers. We also do what's become sort of a generic ceremony, a teepee ceremony, which is a peyote ceremony. Most people don't know that a peyote ceremony, you don't have to take peyote, and if you did, you're not going to get high. I remember my first ceremony, I was thinking, my God, could they give me something? This is 14 hours of prayer. You got to do more than sit there. You know what I mean? That's it. It makes you really examine yourself.
I've been there.
Yeah. So you know what I mean.
Well,
So,
but I didn't experience the part of not thinking that it was getting me into an altered state. I was definitely doing that. But
me
go ahead.
either, but people think it.
Go ahead with what's going on now with your tribe, and we'll talk about that in a little bit.
Well, right now we've been really, really blessed to have a split rock returned to us by the town of Ramapough and the Rockland County Legislature, I guess the sewer district. And part of the ceremony we had the other day was to show that we truly have global support. We'd like to turn it into a World Heritage Site. And we were just recently talking to some of our Buddhist relatives from Tibet and discussing the fact that maybe they too may want to put a shrine on the mountain. There's other people that may want to come and explore that. Yeah, people of your own faith may want to come and really pray, but it's about unifying our spirits, not about my team or your team.
Hmm.
And I think the really interesting thing about a Native American the theology is that we don't have a philosophy. The whole thing is we're saying, come and this. If you pray like this, it should enhance who you are. Come and be the best Jew, Christian, Muslim you can be. We're just saying if you lose this approach, it will enhance your capacity to pray, or should. And so there's no come on over and join up kind of a thing with our. It's just about being more effective as human beings in a good way. That's all.
So you mentioned Split Rock. I was up there with you, I don't know, a month or two ago, and at a ceremony. And it's just so people know, it's a mountain that has at the top a very large rock that is split, and it's a holy place. It's a sacred place and power place. And so, when you said the county and town has turned it over, does that mean you now have dominion in a sense, or some level
Yeah.
of control over the mountain and who goes there?
Well, we have. It's my understanding they returned it to us, and then the first year after we celebrated, we found out they were looking for like $80,000 in taxes. That sounded like more returned, and of course that was put aside. This year it dropped to 32. That was put aside, but I think both town of Ramapough and the state and Rockland County know clearly now it is a sacred place, and it's open to all people to as a sacred place. It's not. It doesn't have an alternate. It's no longer beer bottle heaven. We don't burn crosses there. We're not blocking people. We want you to come and be yourself.
Hmm.
And for that, we're feeling blessed and happy that our local politicians see that and know that and are supporting that.
I'd like to hear you talk a little bit more about the spiritual view of the Ramapough and your tribe, and how you see it as similar or in any way distinct from other Native Americans, other indigenous people, how they overlap or are unified. What
Yeah,
is the
I think
belief system
ultimately,
of? Is there a cosmology at all of spirits, of beings, and other than
well,
human?
there's approaches and how different directions, the kind of energies that come from different directions. There's uh,
Medicine wheel.
yeah, and there's for instance, a lot of people don't know, but for some people, the actual medicine wheel was actually and is, if you know how to handle it, was sort of a form of transportation. And I don't think most people are aware of that. Um,
Transportation in the inner
like
world,
like
or
well, I think from what I've learned, it's sort of like kind of crazy, but yeah, sort of like can actually had the capacity or did have the capacity to transport you somehow
I
to a
see.
different location. But I think it might have been more like a portal-esque type of transporting. But
Yeah.
I don't have that capacity. But I think spiritually, the only the only the only really theology that comes with it is really saying to continue to reach deeper within yourself. I was a little surprised to learn just recently that I guess you've heard of Sir Guru. He's a Buddhist priest person, and he was talking about the significance of directions, and I thought that corresponded perfectly with our understanding of directions. So there is some sense of the cosmology of that directions have plays an important part of how things are going.
Yeah.
Um,
It's
and I
even
think
in the
that's shared.
mystical Jewish tradition. They have
Yeah,
the four directions. Yeah.
yeah. That's what I'm saying. I think when you get beyond my team, your team, I think you find out the heart of all these teams is the same team.
Yeah.
Uh, some people have more in-depth sort of verbalized teachings. Ours is a sort of hands-on do it. it's hard to explain what can transpire in a sweat lodge when you're in there with someone that carries that particular type of energy as opposed to, say, hearing a sermon. But if you notice, there's a lot of smoke, like sage and sweetgrass and things burned. And well, if you go to sort of a temple, or if you go to a mosque, or if you go to a regular church, they're burning some kind of smoke. I don't know what it is, but I would imagine it's the same thing. I mean, I do see them with the thing with the smoke. So I think one group just has been able to almost Europeanize it, you might say, sort of formalize it.
Yeah.
I think maybe that's the biggest difference between Native American beliefs and sort of the general beliefs of others in the world, is that other than doing it in a good way, there's really sort of no rule, because it's all extremely personal. It's about you. And like I said, some people, there's a lot of learning to do, of course. And those who have been able to do that have actually been able to heal people. They've been able to do miraculous things. And so I don't know how, like I said, it's just a lack of actual structure that we would look at as structure. I mean, there's structure, there's protocols, but
Yeah, there are forms. I know, especially in California, I participated with a number of Native elders, different locations, doing sweat lodges, doing Native American church ceremonies, TP ceremonies, and these were elders. And several times, young Native American Indian folk got really angry about the fact that these guys were letting people out, non-native people, into their ceremonies. And it became it still is in many areas, quite a controversial thing. I mean, it gets close to violence. And I wondered if you could comment on that. I know you've been very open for as far as I've seen, and how do you deal with that yourself?
well, let me preface it by this. I would say, unlike any other tribe in the country, we're New Yorkers. We've had to be New Yorkers to survive. So, you know what I'm saying? I don't want to sound crazy, but my thought is this. I've had this happen. You come up and you go, well, I'm so-and-so and I'm 100% something. My first thought is, damn, I feel sorry for you. You got to tell me that? That's all you got going on? So I think in a lot of instances, there are tribal people, particularly younger people, that feel justified because so much has been being taken, and they too don't know that much. If you don't have that security within your spirit, you're not going to be able to share it. So, and yeah, there's people, and some of the people, there's people that steal medicine. But I mean, listen, I know guys with airplanes, they fly all over the world. They steal medicine. I don't want to do nothing with them. That's who they are. So, but I don't think you can't blanket people with that, because that's just as bad as any other form of sort of racist superiority. But I would hope that the people you're talking about were much younger. I can't really see elders talking like that.
No, I know it was younger people, and one of them tore down a sweat lodge where some of us had participated, and a lot of non-native people like myself have, learned a lot from Native American teachers, writings about Native American practices and so forth. And it is a sensitive question about how far where it's appropriate for any of us to do some of the practices and or use some of the symbols and jewelry and things like that represent Native American teachings and so forth.
I don't, like
There's
I
such a
didn't
thing, yeah,
realize.
it's like
I
you
just
said, stealing or appropriating the medicine. So I'm very conscious of that myself in my own work, and I know that people struggle with it.
Yeah, and I always tell people if it, maybe to start with, reach back to your own indigeneity. Reach back beyond your given culture, your given whatever you've been taught that you are. Reach back to where you were a part of the earth,
Yeah.
and let that person aspire. And I think when you get to that point, there is that unity we were talking about.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of people. It's a little different subject. I didn't realize until recently. If you come to my house, I have a permanent Hogan sweat lodge in the backyard made out of cedar. I have a room set aside to pray. Well, I didn't know it was a tax write-off. So,
You found out.
you know,
Yeah.
well, thanks. I'll look into that now, but I didn't know that.
Yeah.
But, what are you going to do? But
What
I
about the
think
role of
it's kind
women
of,
in your tribe, Chief?
I
What?
think women have been and always probably will be the most important factor in Native American life. And I believe ultimately, I would think globally, women, I have this analogy, if I may, I don't know, but it just shows we think in different ways.
Mhm.
Uh, I have this sock analogy, but I think it's clear. If you ask any three men and said, look, we got to have 100 pair of socks. You give them the money, give them an hour or two, you're going to have 100 pair of socks. You go to any three women and say, look, we need 100 pair of socks. Here's the money. You might not get it for 3 or 4 days or more. Why? Because they want to know what kind of shoes are you wearing? Do you need elastic in them socks? What size them socks supposed to be? What they go, you know what I'm saying? What are they going to be made out of? Women just seem to have a more global way of encompassing thought, I guess,
Yeah.
and like they say, women make homes and families and men build houses. And you need both parts to accomplish it. But women have a more deliberative, like I said, when we really have an internal issue, we like the women's circle to really powwow because they have a far deeper sense of deliberation than most men. You and I may come to a decision. It could be the right one, but the women will sort of look at it from so many different facets that you can be assured it is the right decision.
Yeah. So it sounds like if as I look at it, as I listen to you, women and men have equal power. If in fact women may even have a little bit of an edge in terms of decision making and influence and so forth. But you do maintain, if I'm hearing you right, a kind of traditional sense of roles in terms of what people do. Now that's kind of changed in the non-native world, as you know. In America now,
Right.
we do all the kinds of things that men have done traditionally, and men are doing things women did traditionally. Has that crossed over? Has that been an influence on your people?
Yeah, I hate to keep being sort of vague about it, but I think the thing here is women can do anything that women, if they decide that that's what they are. Nobody's trying to hold anybody into a role, into a place, and I think that's the essential difference. And
It's a choice.
and maybe part of that simply is if you go back historically with a number of tribal peoples, women also were warriors.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I think how I'm looking at it in today's world is they're sort of psychological warriors. They're far more thorough than we are. We may come to the same decision, but they'll come to a better decision. Let me put it that way. Or at least my opinion. I don't know.
Yeah. How about the children? Are they being brought up by members of the tribe with a certain sense of that, more of a sense of that identity? Has that changed over the last couple of decades
Yeah.
in terms of participation
Our,
in ceremonies
our
and
children
traditions?
still know who they are. but I think I mean cut you off, but I think what we're seeing is probably a deeper sharing outside of the area because living here, everything is you people. We've actually had kids as recently as I think maybe 3 years ago at the most. You know, you go to school, where are you from? And they're, oh, and then the kid goes, oh, I'm a Native American. I'm a Ramapough, and then including the teacher, you're not an Indian. What are you trying to? You know what I mean? That that's damaging to a child. So I think there is a little bit a sense of a hesitancy.
Hmm.
They still know who they are. They still got regalia. They still go to ceremony when possible. But I think there's sort of a thought that you need to keep your own personal beliefs in the house, because quite frankly, this is still quite an ugly area. And like I said, it's metropolitan New York. So I really believe in my heart it's about money, but anything you can leverage to get what you want works.
Can you talk a little bit about the kinds of ceremonies? Are there stages of initiation, for instance, like vision quests or processes like that, where kids are become adults, become adolescents, become adults, however that's framed, or people be recognized as elders?
Well, I think two things are real easy because if you're an elder, you're probably older. But
Yeah,
I
but not
think what
all
really,
old people are elders.
yeah, that's exactly correct. I was going to say that. I said you probably notice yourself whenever we do ceremonies, you'll notice there's always one or two or maybe three elders. They're the elders because they're the ones that hold the tradition. They're the ones that share it. They're the ones that participate in it. And many times, also, they're the ones that are actively involved in sharing it. So the elders have an extremely important role. And the children are certainly equally as important. But what happens with the children is now we do kind of eventy kind of things with the kids. And then when they get around 13, they'll start looking at doing maybe a lodge. When they get maybe, I would say 18, around 2021, then they'll do a TP ceremony. But on the other hand, all of us will do a tobacco ceremony, which is basically offering a prayer in a certain direction. So that's more of a age neutral kind of a ceremony, and that's
Oh,
used quite
tobacco.
often. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah, a
sorry, go
tobacco
ahead.
ceremony.
Yeah, like tobacco, of course, has become in the mainstream culture, an addictive, poisonous substance, and to
Right.
Native people, it's always been a sacred medicine.
Right. Well, it's our belief that tobacco was the first plant and the favorite plant of the Creator. So therefore, we use it to pray with and offer it to the Creator as a thank you. So it's really quite simple. We're not smoking it otherwise. You couldn't set one of them teepees with everybody smoking. Smoking is another invention there of the East or West or somebody. But yeah, tobacco is used. Actually, I've never, other than in occasionally, depending on the person, tobacco will be used in a pipe to smoke. There's certainly a format, as I'm sure you know. It's about the directions. It's about the people in that circle. It's about what it's about. And the thought with that is you're really puffing it. You're not inhaling it and trying to smoke a pipe. What you're doing is you're sending the smoke up to the heavens. In a way, I often wonder too, is that what is this thing everybody's been looking for a long time? But it's like it's perhaps the most sacred thing that anyone can do is to smoke the pipe because you're literally releasing those prayers into the heavens. And when that happens, usually, if it's not an elder, it's certainly someone that's knowledgeable about the pipe. It's not just somebody that happens to have a pipe.
Right. Right. So I know that some of the tribes have been really had a lot of difficulty with all of the abuse and all of the segregating and things that were taken away. A lot of people turned to alcohol abuse and drug abuse, and I know from my own witnessing, I've seen some Native American church ceremonies, the deep ceremonies, which did involve peyote, um, become really healing paths forward, Red Road and so forth. Um, can you say anything about that? What you've seen of that
Yeah,
process of
yeah,
change?
I think you're right, and I think alcohol essentially becomes is a part of people who have some sense in their being of hopelessness. And I do think you do, and everybody, Native Americans tend to be, or at least they're highlighted as being far more addictive to alcohol than most people. But there are, as you also pointed out, there's also any number of ceremonies that are designed to pray for and to help people able to lay that down.
Yeah,
And it is prevalent in the Native American community. And like I said, you can't, well, the people I know are a little more mature now, but they've all been able to get by it with the help of some spiritual aids.
yeah, that's beautiful when you see that happen. Yeah. Yeah, I once was working at a drug clinic in Oakland, California, and out on the corner of the street, and sometimes I'd go to get lunch. I'd pass by this Indian guy, and he was just drunk all the time. People would call him chief, and people would make, teas and stuff like that. And I kind of had an inclination to just walk up to him and say, "Hey, just go back to your elders and talk to them." And it kind of like hit. And uh, I don't know, maybe it was a couple of months later, I saw him and he was looking really clean and dressed and, looked like a upright Native American person, and he had gone back and he had done ceremony and had really changed. So I've seen that. Yeah.
It's and like I said, maybe it's my perception, but it seems to me that a lot of the Native American, and maybe why they seem to be popular, is that there seems to be some tangibility to after the ceremony, something spiritual you can nearly touch or take with you. I know there's a passage I believe in the Bible that says something about my cup runneth over. I know there's a prayer, but I noticed with the teepee ceremony, uh, you can feel spiritually like your cup is about half full. You'll know it's time to go do a ceremony. Uh, there does seem to have that physical spiritual connection somehow.
Yeah.
And,
Fill the
and
cup,
exactly,
overflow, let it overflow. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. Great. So a lot's going on all around you and in the world these days, and some of it's pretty hard to even look at. And what is it that you do that sustains you, that helps you not only survive but carry on? And going even further than that, what are some of your thoughts on what it is that's happening? Does any of the prophecies you've been in touch with or stories you've heard say something about these times and maybe the role of indigenous people in how we can move forward, what we can learn in terms of
Yeah,
what's happening? It's a big question, I know, but take wherever you want to
yeah.
go with it.
Well, sort of the one, it seems like there's a generic end time prophecy that everyone has, but uh, the one thing I'm getting out I'm getting out of my own doing ceremonies and etc. is pretty well a manifestation of what you saw the other day. It's about you, we, us in unity can change things for the better. A good example in my mind is a lot of what's going on now politically is a lot of fringe people. I always talk about it. It's about 0.5%, and each group sort of leads the charge. In the tribe, maybe we got 5 or 6 people. If you look at them, they sound like they're their own tribe. If you look at the general population, you maybe have a handful of people that happen to be the Ku Klux Klan, so everybody gets branded. You know, you have a handful of extremist political people, and they make it look like they're successful. But the reason for that is, and it goes back to this Native American thing with prayer, we are responsible because we fail to unify and to act in our own way. I encourage people every day to, no matter who you are, what you are, how you view things, please share and do some kindness because they're the answer to someone's prayer. But by us, I don't want anybody to go out and fight somebody that wants to march up and down with their flags and all that foolishness. But we need to at least make a face, let these people know where you can. You're not really pleased with that. You know what I mean? By us, and I mean us being the entire population, constantly being kind-hearted enough to try to ignore them. We've empowered some lunatics. And I think what we're looking at now is, I would tell the people this, you can play around and with who's yelling or whatever. Democracy, if we lose this election, democracy disappears. The Marines will not be landing here to save us. So you can go for a feel-good minute. And I just know from experience, people that like to be tough, you ever notice sometime we highlight people that's supporting us? And my thing is, this country's done it, other countries have done it. We tell you how important you are, and we take those local people, give them a bigger hat, a bigger badge, a bigger gun. When they're not looking, they're the people that end up being the death squads. They're the people that end up pointing fingers at you. So we're watching lunatics now on our streets, but these lunatics around the world, that's what's happened. So I don't want to be. So my message is, everyone, please be the beautiful person you are. Share, do kindness, and stand up and be proud of yourself and who you are, and we'll all be fine. Because if we just keep ignoring, ignore is close to ignorant. Ignorant take over. And there's always somebody ready to stare at ignorant. So that's how I see it. I think that things are hopeful. And
You do feel hopeful?
we can. We're
You,
hopeful, and I think we can and will do better, but we do need to think.
Mhm.
Need to apply a little critical thinking here and there.
Yeah. Mhm. Yeah, thank you for that. I did see you at the big climate march that happened recently in New York City. They gave you an opportunity to
Yeah.
speak at the big platform, and you spoke out really strongly and beautifully. I wanted to congratulate you on that, and thank you for
Thank
that.
you.
And um, and there is that this sort of whatever human beings are doing to each other, there's what they have brought about that's coming down the pike in terms of climate change. And anything you want to say about that?
Well, I think all of us, it's here. And I think from the smallest recycling bit to one thing we should remember, and this is actually part of a Native American theology, spirituality, is we're all guidance and protectors of all of the people of the water, all of the people of the earth, and all of the people of the air. We share an equality of life. We share an equality of importance of spirit, and we need to protect and take care of each each blade of grass as we can. You know, I think that the real lesson there is simply stand up and be kind where you can be. Let kindness reign.
Yeah, there's an
And
expression you use, mitaquiescence, right?
right,
If I'm saying
exactly.
mitaquiescence.
Tokyo. So yeah, I think they also use it out west a little bit. It's all my relations,
Yeah, all my
and
relations, and all my relations meaning what you just said, the earth, the
right.
air, the water, the trees, the animals, all of that.
Yeah, and here in the East we use the same term, but it's ilumumati. It means the same thing. All of my relations,
Uh-huh.
and essentially means that, and that we should work in our capacity to remember it is all of our relations. Although I must say, some squirrels have nearly caused me an accident, but they're still here.
Some relatives are difficult. Right? Yeah. All right. Well, Chief, anything else you want to say to the world, to the universe, to the great spirit?
Well, I think that it's something that grand. The only thing I can say is thank you, and thank you for this thought. Please remember me and us in your dreams, and send blessings to you, Alan, and may you continue to prosper and speak out and just hold the truth, because our greatest armor against all is the truth. So I thank you. Nishi, Nishi, Nishi.
Yeah. Thank you
Absolutely.
again, Chief. We'll talk again.
Absolutely. Thank you. All righty. Have a
Thank you
beautiful
all for
everything.
coming.